I listened to every Beatles album, so you don't have to. And here's what I found out. Starting up first, we have Please Please Me. This is the first of the UK albums. It was released in 1963, the first of two to be released in that year. What I have to say about this album is it does show a good amount of promise, and it pretty much did change the landscape of popular music as we know it, but it's also just full of filler and tackiness, as much as I hate to say it. I understand at the time there were certain tropes and certain musical ideas that were just recycled over and over that were really just the sound of the time. My biggest complaint with this album is it sounds really dated and, in my opinion, kind of cheesy. Some of this is just drowned in that 60s cheese, but I do like the heavier songs here like Twist and Shout. Some of my least favorites in the whole track listing were the covers, because again, they're just soaked in that outdated old sound. I'd say this project is definitely a product of its time, and some of the songs or some of the ideas have not aged very well. I do love the title track, and there are some others that held up extremely well in my opinion. I wish this album had either more genuinely fun and charming songs that aren't cheesy, or more hard rockers. I know they're not a metal band, I'm not expecting really heavy but some of the grandpa rock here, or even great grandpa rock, is a little bit too much to handle for me sometimes. Some of my favorite songs were the opener, I Saw Her Standing There. Please Please Me is actually my favorite, tied with Twist and Shout. Do You Want to Know a Secret is pretty underrated. The covers were kind of okay, within like the 50 to 60 range for me. Some of my absolute least favorites were Baby It's You, A Taste of Honey, P.S. I Love You, and Love Me Do. I really do not enjoy that song. It just exemplifies all the corniest fucking parts of this band at the time and this popular sound at the time. So I know it was a very important album in the scope of the musical landscape, but there is just some stuff that was unforgivable here. So for that reason, I'm gonna have to give this first album a 54 out of 100. And here's the track ratings I would give all the songs. Alright, that's going to be it for the first one. Next up we have Close Your Eyes and I'll Kiss You Too with the Beatles. This is the second album released in 1963, the second official UK album. I might upset some people with this opinion, but I don't really care, it's my video. I think this album is actually worse than the last one. I think they somehow managed to cram even more cheese into the songs this time around. Till There Was You is a song that I think features some really cool guitar work, but the whole song is just another just product of its time. I'm sure it was great at the time. I know it's another cover, it's not one of their songs. The main carrier for that song is the guitar work in my opinion. It's really creative, really flowy. Please Mr. Postman doesn't really work as a serious cover for me and just kind of sounds like a novelty song. There is honestly only really one song here that I really enjoyed. That's going to be All My Loving. I mean, it has a great walking bass line, and the guitar part from Lennon is like crazy with those triplets. It's not easy. I really don't have much more to say about this one. It's kind of outlandish to me that some critics saw this as an evolution, when to me it couldn't be further from that. Once again, there's just a lot of covers, outdated shit, kind of cringe songs like Little Child. As I mentioned earlier, songs like Till There Was You, Please Mr. Postman, the covers like that, Devil in Her Heart, You Really Got a Hold on Me. I really do not enjoy that song. I have no tolerance for corny songs at all. I Want to Be Your Man is a song that they actually ended up giving to the Stones. So with that being said, I was not really a big fan of this album. There was only one really good song, All My Loving. There were some others that came close. I decently enjoyed George's moody sentiments on Don't Bother Me. It's a pretty good song. Hold Me Tight is very repetitive, but I don't know, it just has a hold on me. And one of the better covers on here is Money, That's What I Want. So for that reason, I would have to give With the Beatles a 49 out of 100. Disappointing, I know. And here's the track ratings for all the songs. Alright, next up we have A Hard Day's Night. The American version of this album is pretty much a soundtrack, with some songs being repeated just as being instrumentals, or some other miscellaneous songs that were composed for the movie of the same name. However, when it comes to the UK version of this album, this is where, in my opinion, the band started inching closer to that legend status. and they kind of abandoned the amateur songwriting of the first two albums. I think one of the big benefits of this album in my eyes is they abandoned the covers. I think it's a very solid effort, and it nearly reaches greatness for me. There's some really beautiful songs, and for the most part stood the test of time. The songs are a lot more competent, can stand on their own feet without relying on nostalgia or their status as a band. There's some genuinely well-written songs here. There aren't even really any significantly bad songs. Some of my least favorites were I'll Cry Instead, When I Get Home, and I'll Be Back, so the album kind of faltered near the end. Some of my favorites were the iconic title track, A Hard Day's Night, the beautiful If I Fell. My favorite of all time on here is And I Love Her. Also, I enjoyed I Should Have Known Better, I'm Happy Just to Dance With You, Can't Buy Me Love, Things We Said Today, You Can't Do That. So with all that being said, I'm going to have to give this album a 69 out of 100. And here's all the track ratings for all of the songs. So moving on to the next album, we have Beatles For Sale. This album actually starts off pretty strong with a couple of decently written songs, but then the quality goes straight down the toilet pretty much. I do think Lennon's voice was a perfect fit for the Chuck Berry cover, Rock and Roll Music, which is a really fun little song. This would be my favorite on here if not for the classic 8 Days a Week. However, this album kind of starts to remind me of With the Beatles, because you look past the good songs and there's just so much filler that it's almost unbearable. Looking at the title and the cover alone is a clear sign that this was just a result of the band being rushed by their label, just trying to put out anything to keep the masses happy or the record label happy. The really tacky songs have returned sadly, and the sappy shit is definitely the main downfall of the album for me, and some of it's hard to sit through with a straight face. I'd say it's a pretty disappointing effort. The better songs definitely saved this album score-wise, and whereas With the Beatles was constantly mediocre, this album is mostly awful with a few better songs to lift it up. Some of my favorites were 8 Days a Week, Rock and Roll Music, No Reply, and I Don't Want to Spoil the Party. Some of my least favorites were I'll Follow the Sun, Words of Love, Every Little Thing. I think you're noticing a pattern here. I'm not a big fan of the sappy songs. So with all that being said, I'm going to have to give this album a 55 out of 100. And here's all the track ratings. Alright, so that was it for that album. Next up we have Help. So I think the Beatles make a decent enough recovery on this album, putting out some mostly consistently good music across the board. From, once again, the iconic title track to the charming Bob Dylan homage, You Got to Hide Your Love Away. Seems to be something here for everyone, really. I think this is one of the most solid releases from their early work, only second to A Hard Day's Night. I think the band has found their footing again and are about to cross into legendary status with the next album, so there's definitely some foretelling here. I think this album is the perfect bridge between their early stuff and the later stuff, showing the best parts of each era starting to peek in. It's kind of funny looking at it in today's context, how tracks 5 and 6 are a song about being unfaithful, followed by pretty much an R nice guys anthem. I mean, pretty poetic if you ask me. This is what they call male manipulator core, right? I think You Like Me Too Much might seal the deal on that verdict, but anyways, moving forward. I think they managed to make the softer songs not stomach churning anymore for the most part. I'm looking at you, It's Only Love. The hard rockers are pretty cool. I actually really like the closing track, Dizzy Miss Lizzy. I don't know why everyone hates it. I think it's raw, visceral, and tribal. Yeah, it's kind of repetitive, but it kind of has that angry caveman energy in a certain way, which I really enjoyed. And the drum sound is fucking heavy on that song. I definitely wouldn't call this album a masterpiece, but it is an admirably solid effort from this group, except for some choice songs that brought my score down considerably. There are 2 country western inspired songs on this album, and I think only one of them holds enough weight to be listened to again intentionally. If you want a hint, it's not the one with Ringo on lead vocals. Sorry. I think it was definitely a step in the right direction, shows some signs of maturing, and it brought them just that much closer to becoming that legendary band everyone knows, after the huge misstep of Beatles For Sale especially. Some of my favorites on here were Help, You've Got to Hide Your Love Away, The Night Before, I Need You, Ticket to Ride, Dizzy Miss Lizzy, and my favorite, Yesterday. 2 of the songs that I thought were actually genuinely pretty bad were You Like Me Too Much and It's Only Love. With that being said, I would have to give this album a 64 out of 100, and here's all the track ratings. Alright, next up we have my personal favorite Beatles album. That's going to be Rubber Soul. So it was kind of easy to tell from some of their early work that they were destined for greatness. Starting with the opening song, Drive My Car, I think it's one that has kind of lost some of its luster for me as time goes on, and it sounds a little bit more novelty than some of the other songs here. I think all of the other songs offer some very mature sounding and introspective lyrics with some really great storytelling. Another way that this album was pretty innovative is the introduction of the sitar on Norwegian Wood, This Bird Has Flown, which was, I believe, one of the first examples of Eastern instruments in Western pop music. I also really appreciated the lyrics that seemed to take on more of a realist and even a slightly pessimistic view this time around. The harmonized backing vocals throughout this album are sometimes enough to make you feel like you're floating, especially on songs like You Won't See Me and Nowhere Man. This project is truly the beginning of their new era in which they essentially changed the world of popular music forever. Think for Yourself is a very early example of a bass being played through a fuzz guitar pedal. However, I think the true masterpiece of this album is In My Life, in which Lennon pretty much writes about an entire lifetime experience, despite only being in his mid-20s at the time. It's so astonishingly introspective and heartfelt. And the song was also covered by Johnny Cash and Ozzy Osbourne to further cement its legendary status. I would be completely biased if I didn't acknowledge that songs like The Word come off as a little bit tacky, kind of calling back to the earlier mushy songs. Addressing the Elephant in the Room, the last song was actually based on an Elvis song, and it wasn't Lennon admittedly singing about his personal demons, which he would later on getting better. Wrapping up this album, it is aged extremely well, and it should be looked as a landmark album for not only pop music, but for music overall. Although it doesn't show off the most flashy studio techniques like later albums, it's the best example of how great they can sound when stripped down. I think this is truly the turning point in the band's career, and for popular music in general once again. Even the few weaker tracks have much more strong points than things to hate them for. Is an extremely solid and consistent album, and it proves that they have the ability to write extremely captivating and innovative songs before the flashy studio technique. Some of my favorites ever on here are In My Life, which is a masterpiece in my opinion, Nowhere Man, Think for Yourself, You Won't See Me, Norwegian Wood, If I Needed Someone. My two least favorites were What Goes On and Wait. So with that being said, I'm going to give this album an 84 out of 100. And here's the track ratings. Alright, so that's going to be it for Rubber Soul. Next up we have Revolver. So this time is where they definitely dived headfirst into using the outlandish and completely crazy studio techniques, from the reversed instruments to the tape loops and speed manipulation, etc. It's insane the amount of innovation birthed from this album. For the most part, they have now completely abandoned the folky, authentic sound of Rubber Soul and crossed into new musical horizons. I really love some of the more dreamy songs like I'm Only Sleeping and Here, There, and Everywhere, two near masterpieces from John and Paul respectively. There's also the melancholic song For No One, which I really respected from Paul McCartney because it showed some of his more pessimistic view of things and more of a realistic side to it and more introspective, which I really appreciate because I'm not really a big fan of McCartney's more cheesy surface level love songs, or silly love songs as he called them. What a depressing concept in the song, crying for no one, not even for yourself. Or maybe he means you cry for yourself and not for them. Anyways, moving on to the George Harrison songs, they're decent, but really nothing super impressive in my eyes. I've never been a big fan of his more psychedelic music. I think they do serve a purpose within the album and within the musical landscape at the time, but they feel just a little bit like filler to me. I do admit I have a good amount of distaste for the overly simplistic and childish Good Day Sunshine. A verse and a chorus with a silly piano solo is not a complete song. Sorry, Paul. Anyways, I don't have any right to tell him what a good song is. That song and the children's song In Disguise, Yellow Submarine, bring my score down probably than I would like to give such an important and groundbreaking album as this. More hot takes no one asked for. If Paperback Writer and Rain were included on this album instead of Good Day Sunshine and Yellow Submarine, holy shit, it might be one of the best albums of all time. Furthermore, there are some really progressive, musically, not lyrically, moments on She Said, and there is some genius dissonance used, and I want to tell you. Finally, we move on to the absolutely insane closing track, Tomorrow Never Knows. I mean, this intense drug trip of a song sounds like we still will not be ready for it in another 59 years. It's so amazing that they were able to make something that sounded like that with the technology of the time. It's really only a testament to the absolute genius and innovation of the band and the studio engineers. Finally, I do think this project is the slightest bit weaker than Rubber Soul because of a few certain aspects, which I described earlier. Once again, some of my favorites were I'm Only Sleeping, Here, There, and Everywhere, She Said, and Your Bird Can Sing, which I think features one of the first lead guitar harmonies in popular music, but that's a discussion for another time. For No One, and the masterpiece, the 100 out of 100, Tomorrow Never Knows. My least favorites were Love You Too, Yellow Submarine, and Good Day Sunshine. With all that being said, I would give this album a nice 76. I'm happy with that. And here's what I would rate all the tracks. Alright, that's going to be it for Revolver. Next up we have Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. So this is an album that some people consider to be the first concept album in history, although that claim is usually hotly debated. The cinematic and theatrical effects make it a truly ahead of its time feat, not to mention this is the very first album to list the lyrics inside the sleeve of the record. It's definitely an acid trip of a project with some truly revolutionary songs throughout, but also some songs that bring the whole project down in my opinion. Sorry. I think the first 5 songs are pretty solid. As we move from the opening all the way to Fixing a Hole, we seem to be on a good streak, and then we are met with the extremely chintzy and offensively bad She Is Leaving Home. Boo. This is where the album starts to go downhill for me, and all the mature and sophisticated songwriting is interrupted by the first 2 granny music songs, as Lennon called them, and I wholeheartedly agree. I hate to say it once again, but Paul's writing does kind of ruin the album for me once again. However, maybe, just maybe, when I'm older, I will appreciate this writing more. I know I called it immature, but I think it's definitely mature in other ways, just maybe ways that I can't fully grasp right now, so give me a break. For now, though, I want to give my true opinion and say his songs just come off as tacky to me, but things might change in the future. Not to say that I hate his writing, or this album, or any album that he's a part of, really. Paul does seem to be the one to cram the albums with the silly little love songs, as the man himself would call them once again. However, the songs like When I'm 64 bring the definition of novelty to a whole new peak, and are kind of hard for me to sit through, quite honestly. Once again, I will express my discontent with songs like Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane not being included, which were released as singles before this, and were even in the album's writing sessions. What the fuck? One song that really deserves praise for the time being is Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite. I mean, somehow these guys made you feel like you were actually at the circus, and it's just a song. Finally, the last section of the album brings everything back around for me. Lovely Rita is an example of their fun and silly songs done correctly, which is a genuinely charming and fun way. Good Morning is the Beatles' most proggy song ever. The time signatures shift like crazy in this, and there's even a part that sounds like it's a double kick kit, but it's just Ringo playing the drums like normal, and Paul hitting the floor tom at the same time, making it appear to be double bass. I mean, this is such an undeniably revolutionary song in so many ways that it's not even funny. The reprise of the title track quite literally starts with a hip-hop beat, which was about 5 or so years ahead of the curve on that. The rest of that song is also quite nice, which is an excellent lead out and transition into that last song. Now, I could probably go on for hours about the closing song, because I think it might be one of the best songs of all time. I mean, it starts with some beautiful guitar and piano chords that go amazingly with Lennon's storytelling. The whole track has some really fitting bass and drum parts. Moving on to the lyrics, it's really interesting how there seems to be this theme of duality throughout, whether it be the duality of life, the good and bad parts of life. Also, the duality of man is definitely shown when it comes to John's more melancholy, serious part and Paul's upbeat, positive part of the song. This also does a great job symbolizing Lennon and McCartney's writing techniques, their sounds, their personalities. The orchestral build-up might be literally one of the most unnerving and terrifying things I've ever heard, and I can only imagine what listeners at the time thought of it. Imagine just sitting there in your chair and you just hear this hellish build-up in the orchestra just freaking you the fuck out in 1967. The very last piano chord is also revolutionary, being played on 4 different pianos, and is still to this day, I believe, the longest sustained piano chord in history. This is achieved by playing an E major chord on 4 pianos simultaneously and turning up the faders
on the mixing board. All in all, I will say, even though I don't think the album is an undisputed masterpiece, I think the closing song definitely is, and it's one of the easiest 100s I've ever given. If only some of the other songs were just as good, it might be the greatest album of all time. Some of my favorite songs were obviously A Day in the Life, the absolute masterpiece, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Reprise, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, the opening song, With a Little Help from My Friends, Getting Better, Fixing a Hole, Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite, Lovely Rita, Good Morning, and there's 3 stinkers here for me, She's Leaving Home, Within You Without You, and When I'm 64. With all that being said, I think a 75 out of 100 is agreeable, I hope, and here's the track ratings. Alright, that's going to be it for Sgt. Pepper's. Next up we have Magical Mystery Tour. So, some might see this as a part 2 of Sgt. Pepper's. That's certainly how I see it, except maybe a little bit weaker in some areas. I mean, the opening and title track is very enthralling and experimental in a number of different ways, provides a great opening and really gets your hopes up and hypes you up for the rest of this. Then we are greeted with a song that definitely has McCartney written all over it. Maybe a little bit too much in some ways, to be honest. I mean, the recorders are really an interesting choice, but they fit the whimsical sound of the album as a whole, so I'm not really mad at it. For me, that song does miss the mark just a little bit, as we are once again crossing into novelty territory. That kind of turns me off from this group as a whole. This particular song I remember liking a whole lot more when I was younger, but listening back nowadays it does sound just a little bit silly. Flying is possibly one of the first instrumental pop songs, only aided by some vocalizing but no words or discernible lyrics. I mean, even when making, in my opinion, subpar music, they still find a way to innovate. It's just insane. That actually brings up a very interesting point that I would make about the band as a whole, the influence and the innovation at the time versus the actual quality of the music. George's song, Blue Jay Way, is one of the trippiest things you can imagine. I mean, the entirety of the song is guided by Ringo's slow, phasing psychedelic drums, some organs, and George melodically groaning in your right ear, along with some unnecessarily creepy reverse backing vocals panned down the middle, and some sparse string arrangements. The next track in the listing I hate with a burning passion, as it is so simple and tacky that it's almost insulting. Anyways, for the next song we have I Am the Walrus, a song so odd that it ends up winning me over ultimately. When John does the silly songs, he has the perfect sense of humor and doesn't take himself seriously. Has that great sense of satire as well that makes them land every single time. I feel that when McCartney tries to take goofy songs too seriously, they end up sounding a million times more novelty. Whereas John is saying, hey, this is a silly song, I know it is, so I'm just going to go all the way with it and not try to take it more seriously or make it anything that it's not. Funnily enough, even though Hello Goodbye sounds like it would fit right perfectly under the criteria of songs I hate, this one I really don't hate, honestly. The track is just silly enough and fun and lighthearted that it wins me over. It's not over the top and comes off more as charming and endearing, which is a type of silly songs that I love. Next we have 2 feats of musical history crammed right next to each other, which should have been on the last album. Anyways, these songs did find their place eventually, and they fit decently well on this album, despite how imbalanced the overall project is for me. The second to last track definitely brings some excitement back for me, and it truly sounds like some type of end credits scene, and I think it should have been the last track, honestly. Finally, the closing track is an overrated, boring, cheesy, global hippie anthem for peace, with a totally fucked up solo. I mean, has anyone ever noticed that before? Like, seriously, George, what the fuck happened? You sound like he was missing notes on Guitar Hero. So, when it comes to my favorite and least favorite songs here, I'm definitely going to have to say Strawberry Fields Forever is one of my favorites. Actually, my favorite on the whole album. It's 5 points away from a 100 for me. Then we have Baby You're a Rich Man, Penny Lane, Hello Goodbye, Magical Mystery Tour, the title track, I Am the Walrus. 2 really bad ones in my opinion, are Your Mother Should Know and All You Need Is Love. With all that being said, I hope I don't get flamed for this. I don't know if people love this album a whole lot. I mean, I really didn't find it that great. I found it to be more of a mixed bag. I'd give it a 68 out of 100. Don't kill me in the comments. And here's what I would rate all the songs. Alright, that's going to be it for that album. Next up we have the White Album, or the self-titled album. So I think this is definitely an eclectic collection of songs with a lot of ups and downs. It clocks in at just over an hour and 30 minutes and is bursting at the seams with personality and creativity. However, in my opinion, maybe a little bit too much, and maybe all of the ideas presented did not work out as well as they thought they would. Just my opinion. I think some of Lennon's most breathtaking compositions are here, such as Dear Prudence, Julia, and Sexy Sadie, among others, as well as the incredibly ahead of its time avant-garde audio collage monster, which is Revolution 9. I mean, we can't forget about Helter Skelter, which held the beginnings of heavy metal and punk and heavy music, and is maybe the heaviest rock song ever recorded, but I honestly would not call it a metal song. Sorry. At the same time, this album somehow contains some of my least favorites from this band, such as the cheesy children's song Obla Di Obla Da, along with my least favorite, the ridiculous 52-second abomination known as What Honey Pie. Also found on this double album is one of Harrison's masterpieces, or near masterpieces, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, with a legendary wailing Eric Clapton solo. Not to be looked over is Happiness is a Warm Gun, and the criminally underrated Savoy Truffle, and Long, Long, Long. McCartney's acoustic civil rights anthem Blackbird is a beautiful song with a great message. And Harrison tries his hand at political and societal commentary with Piggies, but quite honestly it falls a little bit flat for me. This album, while being packed to the brim with music in all types and genres and shapes and styles of music, it does start to feel a little bit bloated. There are quite obviously a few filler songs that could have been omitted to make a much better, more comprehensive album. However, at the same time, if this project was more comprehensive and not as bloated, it wouldn't have the same legend status in other people's eyes that it does today. This is also the first appearance of a song mainly written by Ringo, Don't Pass Me By. This is another song that I used to like much more than I do now. It's just kind of grown off of me. This is in no way a really terrible album, but it shows the same issue as most other Beatles albums from this time. It's just kind of a mixed bag. I mean, it's incredibly unbalanced when it comes to the quality of the actual music, at least in my opinion. I would call this the textbook definition of a mixed bag. My favorites here are Back in the USSR, Dear Prudence, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, Happiness is a Warm Gun, I'm So Tired, Blackbird, Julia, Your Blues, Everybody's Got Something to Hide, Sexy Sadie, Helter Skelter, Long, 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 and Savoy Truffle. Some of the lowlights are Obla Di Obla Da, Why, Continuing Story of Bungalow Bill, Rocky Raccoon, Why Don't We Do It in the Road, Honey Pie, and Revolution 9. With all that being said, don't kill me once again, this is my opinion. My opinion, I would give this album a 61 out of 100. I'm not giving it a 100, I'm not giving it a 0. So it's more of a middle ground album for me. I'm sorry if it's your favorite. And here's what I would rate the 30 songs here. Alright, so that's going to be it for the White Album. Next up we have my second favorite album from this band. That is Abbey Road. So honestly, it does not get much more legendary than this album. You couldn't if you tried, honestly. From the cover alone to the track listing full of masterpieces with a few duds here and there, in my opinion, it is an admirably and undeniably solid album. Starting right away with a controversial opinion, the opening track really does nothing special for me. Maybe I've just heard it too many times, but it doesn't really do much at all. However, the song that immediately follows is an absolute masterpiece and one of the most beautiful love songs ever, Something. Moving on to Maxwell Silver Hammer, this is an instance where McCartney's more silly songs do actually kind of connect, and I'm able to receive the humor well this time. It's ridiculous enough that it's charming. Once again, that's a key word. Charming, kind of like a modern-day shitpost in the form of a song. And honestly, I share a similar sentiment with Ringo's song. It does sound like a kid's song, but it has enough charm to be taken seriously. The guitar work is really cool. It's just really fun. So, here's where I might get in trouble again. Here Comes the Sun is a masterfully written, gorgeous song. But the hippie vibes and the cheese are just a little bit too much for me, so I really cannot enjoy that song. This is definitely the most consistent and solid album they have ever put out, and is very, very close to being their best, if not for Rubber Soul. I mean, their last album pales in comparison to this record, being quite honest. The medley at the end of this album might be the most impressive instance of controlled chaos in history. The songs string together so perfectly, yet there is a perfect amount of disjointedness somehow. Sun King is pure bliss in the form of audio, and the way that carried that weight reprises to the starting of the medley is an absolute genius move. Oh, not to mention, these guys invented doom metal with the ending of I Want You, She's So Heavy. If you tell me that's not doom metal, you must be out of your fucking mind. It's low droning, drop detuned guitars with the ever increasing static in the background, imitating the heavy distortion of doom metal. I mean, it's just incredibly ahead of its time, and the first doom metal song, I will say. I think they even got closer to a true metal sound with this than they ever did with Helter Skelter. That's just a very, very heavy hard rock song to me. It's never been metal. It would be my favorite on here if it wasn't for something. It's a landmark album of pop and music in general. If it didn't have a few specific overplayed and, in my opinion, overrated songs, it would probably be my favorite. So some of the songs I enjoyed are the masterpiece, Something, Maxo Silverhammer, Oh Darling, oh fuck it. I loved all of them except for Come Together and Here Comes the Sun. So with all that being said, I'm going to give this album an 83 out of 100. I think that's respectable. And here's what I would rate all the tracks. Alright, that's going to be it for Abbey Road. Next up and lastly, we have Let It Be. So, in my opinion, this is the one final step down for this group and the final nail in the coffin musically. I mean, this thing has never impressed me very much as a whole, and it's really a telltale sign of the band dissolving at the seams. Once again, the Lennon and Harrison-led songs saved this project for me so much. The highs this time are nowhere near the highs of the last album, Abbey Road, and the lows this time are way lower. I mean, whoever's idea it was to put two literal filler songs on this instead of Don't Let Me Down, which is a great song, did them really a great disservice. Thankfully, they did include Don't Let Me Down on Let It Be Naked, which I actually prefer over this album, the official version. Also, Billy Preston's soulful and tasteful keys really helped this record on a few songs. I think this album starts off with four solid songs, some good, some great. Suddenly we hit a downward tailspin with the incredibly overrated, cheesy Let It Be, the title track, positioned in sort of a filler sandwich on this record. Being brutally honest, the only part I like of Let It Be is Harrison's perfectly tasteful guitar solo. Thankfully, things do pick up again with I've Got a Feeling, which is one of the best examples of a Lennon and McCartney pen song done incredibly right. And don't think for a second that I forgot about the gorgeous Transcendental Across the Universe. Although the grandiose of the strings and the choirs on this version make it sound way too over the top. However, this isn't even a hint of the amount of overcompensating and overdoing that we will see later on The Long and Winding Road, which was even too much for Sir Paul McCartney, as he would go on to say he never even wanted any of those additional instruments. I swear, Phil Spector should not have only been charged with the murder of that woman, but the murder of that song. The dissolution of this band is so palpable that Harrison even wrote a song about it called I Me Mine, which reflects his feelings on his bandmates being selfish. I'm honestly surprised that Lennon and McCartney would allow something like this on the album, considering the amazing size of their egos. Also, Harrison has another great song, For You Blue, although it's a shame that his acoustic guitar is turned all the way down after the intro. This is another reason why Let It Be Naked is better than this version. The album does end on a high note with Get Back, which is politically and challenging and brave for its time. If you know anything about the original lyrics, they would have probably got into more trouble than the Bigger Than Jesus thing if they kept them. So it's a fairly disappointing send-off for this legendary band, and very, very much a mixed bag, like most of their other later albums. Some of my favorites here were Two of Us, Dig a Pony, Across the Universe, I Me Mine, I've Got a Feeling, For You Blue, and Get Back. Some that I could really, really, really do without are Dig It, Let It Be, Maggie May, and The Long and Winding Road. The only other one besides those, which I would give a 65, kind of middle ground, is one after 909. So that's pretty much my thoughts on all the songs. With that being said, I would sadly have to give this send-off of a legendary band a 62 out of 100. I'm sorry, don't kill me, it's just my opinion. And here's what I would rate all the songs. Alright, and that's going to be it for my Beatles deep dive. I do want to say in conclusion that no matter what the quality of this band's albums and songs might have been at some times, you have to be really grasping at straws to not call them the most legendary, important, innovative band in history. They changed music in so many ways it's even hard to grasp. Just the sheer amount of innovations and ingenuity behind the band and the engineers. Without this band, pop music would sound so different today. And I challenge you to find even a modern band that would have existed without the Beatles, because chances are your favorite modern band was inspired by an older band, which was inspired by maybe another one, and then inspired by the Beatles. So even though their musical output hasn't been the greatest thing in the whole world to me, there is no denying they're the most legendary, and if you think otherwise, you might be a little bit slow. I'm just kidding. So my favorite album ever from this band was Rubber Soul, and my least favorite was With the Beatles. And here's my tier list ranking of all their albums. Anyways, that's going to be it for my Beatles deep dive. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.